this. And it's being recorded now. Okay, so Laura had asked me to pull together a little overview of what happens basically once a project is submitted, or as I put it, after the contract is signed. I guess this could be for a brand new client, which involves a contract, of course, brand new sale of Laserfiche. It could be an existing Laserfiche client. That's not our client. That's coming over from another VAR. And then the other option is just this could be a client that is our client and that we are working with actively and have a new project that they'd like to undertake. And so I guess those are mostly the genesis of a project, of what could be true. And so I just kind of want to take you through each of those scenarios and outline the different steps we take. So agenda for today is going to be we're going to talk about the new project submission form. We're going to look at implementation documentation, and then we're going to look at individual project documentation. And if you have questions as we go throughout this, go ahead and ask. Otherwise, at the end, we can kind of open it up and just answer general questions either about the process or anything else that you want to ask about consulting, I guess. So before I jump into that, does anybody have any questions for me right off the bat? Okay, I will take your silence as a no. All right, so let's start off with the new project submission form. So this should be how every new project starts. We should be filling out the new project submission form, and below is a URL to that form. Has everybody seen this form? Does everybody know where to find this?
Yes.
So that's a yes from Jennifer. How about the newest
This is Mike.
people?
No, I have not.
Okay. So Mike
I'm
has
with Michael on that. I don't.
Okay. All right. So good, we're going to cover it. Chris, you've submitted projects to this, right?
Yes, I have.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll send out this PowerPoint after we're done here so that everybody has this link. But let's take a look at a screenshot of that form, okay? And if we want to open it up, we can do that too. All right. So this is the new project submissions form. And again, this is a form that's built using Laserfiche forms. If you want to look at the very top, there's a little note that kind of has to do with our process. And as you can see, it says always send orders or contracts to orders@citiesdigital.com before filling out this form. Okay, so that's the thing you always need to do first. And when we've had a couple different iterations of this process, and the last time we redesigned it, the real fear about having the form contain everything as well as the contract is that oftentimes, as an account representative, you're not in office, you maybe don't have access to VPN in, and it's a good idea to just get that signed documentation into orders as soon as possible so that the ball can get rolling. But if you want anything beyond that to happen, beyond ordering the software, anything beyond setting up contracts, you need to fill out this form because this is what tells consulting that we have something to do. All right, so the main thing that I'll note on this form and what has to do with our topic today is really this first set of radio buttons that you'll fill out. And you can see that there are 5 different options here, and this is called the project category, of course. And so let's talk about what each of those mean, because each of these options result in different processes happening, result in different documentation being developed. So we'll start with a Laserfiche implementation project. And this is meant to be used when a brand new company is being brought on as a Laserfiche client to Cities Digital. Okay, so this is someone that has never worked with Laserfiche before. So if you have an existing Laserfiche client that's with another VAR and you're bringing them over to Cities Digital and you want to go and fill out this form to get things started because they have projects that they want to execute with us, do not use Laserfiche implementation project because that's not really what we're doing there. It's a little bit different type of work that we're performing. So again, this is for a brand new Laserfiche client, brand new to Cities Digital. Does that first radio button make sense to everybody?
Yes.
All right, then the next two are a large project and a small project. And, this one's kind of tough. This is kind of, kind of relying on you to use your gut on what the project seems like. So here's how I would look at it. If you're talking to a client and, they're like, hey, Daniel, we need someone to help us build a little workflow that, maybe moves a file around and sends out an email notification. Something simple like that that's just single workflow or setting up a form. That's probably a small project. Whereas if you're talking about onboarding an entire department or building a complex approval process, like if there are large flowcharts associated with a process that a client wants help with, then that's more like a large project. And it's important to try to differentiate those two, because when the project coordinator gets this form, which is the next step I'm going to go over, they're trying to make a determination on how big this project is. They're trying to look at people's calendars. They're trying to get an idea of who has capacity to take on a project. So if we tell them that it's a small project when it's really a large project, that can cause a lot of disruption in our department because resources aren't added appropriately at the onset, and that can get us into trouble down the road. So again, does the difference between, do those benchmarks kind of make sense? The difference between a large project and a small project generally makes sense to everybody?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. And if you've ever got a question on that, just reach out to someone in consulting and kind of give them the overview of what you're thinking before you submit this form, and they can kind of guide you a little bit on whether it seems large, seems small. That might be tough for a lot of the new people that are here, just because the one thing that you don't have at this point is just lots of experience with this particular software. So as your time grows with it, you're going to have a better idea of what's a large project and what's a small project. Last two items there, we have an audit request and a workflow audit request. Who can tell me what an audit request is?
A request for a system audit?
The definition is in the name, right?
Sounded like a trick question.
So for anybody that doesn't know, one of the things that we include in our LSAP with clients is we include at least one audit of their system per year. And what that audit is a document that we developed that goes through and tries to assess kind of the health of their system. It's a lot less on like the networking side as much as it is looking at their repository and getting an idea of, is their file folder structure a mess? Is there consistency to it? Do they seem to have a naming convention for how they store files? Are they using templates and metadata? Things like that. We're trying to kind of give them an idea of whether they're leveraging the product to its fullest capacity and whether they're following some general best practices that we have. So I think probably at this point, Chris and Jennifer, you've both seen that audit, right? And probably reviewed that with clients?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. And so Daniel, Jason, Mike, is this a totally new concept, something you haven't heard of before or seen at this point?
Yes, this is new to me.
Okay. So that'll probably be something for another day to go over, and probably something that Laurel will cover with you on what those audits look like. But just want you to know, for the purposes of this training session, what that is. So it's sending in a submission to consulting that says, hey, City of Kent wants their audit, their annual audit done. Go fill out this form. That'll get signed to someone in consulting, and when it's done, they'll be reaching out to you to review the audit with you so that you can work with the client to review it too. The last button that we have there is the workflow audit request, and I know Jennifer and Chris were familiar with the basic audit request, but are either of you familiar with the workflow audit request?
Kind of. I know we talked about it a couple times, like talked about developing it as an additional request that they can pay for to have done, but I never kind of heard about pricing or how much it specifically covers.
Okay. Yeah, and so it's very new, and Pricing, I can't give you that answer. I only know that we've used this for one client. I think that this was for, Village of Menomonee Falls. So Chris, I think you probably had some experience working with them, perhaps. But yeah, this is kind of meant to take a step up from the basic audit request and look more specifically and in more detail at their workflows. And it's kind of the same idea. We want to check the health of how they're using workflow, determine whether they're using best practices. And the example I can give you is that in the one time that I've used this, which was for the Village of Menomonee Falls, as I just mentioned, they had an internal resource that had built like, I don't know, 70 workflows in under a year's time. And my reaction to that was, I bet they don't work right. This would have to be someone's full-time job, just building, building, building. And of course, as we looked at it further, half of them had never been tested, half of them had never been used. And so this was kind of our chance to get state of the nation to some degree on what was happening with their system, whether best practices were being followed, and that allowed us to produce a plan to kind of build an actual framework for how they choose to start their own internal projects, very similar to this form actually. So that's a new product, and again, that'd probably be something, Laura, that I don't even know if CRM has like has pricing for this, so that's something to check out. But that's what that last option is.
I didn't know it was a thing, so.
Well, good thing we entered. Okay. All right, so again, the real main thing that I want to make sure is, number one, you know that this form exists, so check mark on that, and I can send out that URL to everyone afterwards. And then number two, just want you to understand how that project category section works and how critical that is for the consulting team as we try to assign resources and create documentation to facilitate that project. The rest of this form is pretty straightforward. You'll have a drop-down of client names. You'll indicate whether they have a professional services package and what package that is, who you are submitting it, who the main contact is, give the project a name, and tell us as much about the project as you can. I guess I would say with the caveat that you're trying to distill that down into something that gives us good detail in a high-level overview way, I guess. And there is a spot to upload supplemental documentation on this form, so if clients give you project charters, if they give you any project documentation, flowcharts, etc., notes that you've taken that you want to add, you can upload those and we get all that in the form as well. Anybody have any questions about this form, or would anyone want to open this up and take a closer look at it together? We could do that. We've got time.
I think I'd just like to mention with when you're using this form for a Laserfiche implementation project, for our some of our newer sales members, you can also include the project proposal. Michael, you and I discussed this a little bit earlier today, but the proposal a lot of times does have some really great information that would be helpful for the consulting team, so
okay,
you can attach those here too.
Let's take a real quick look at it and just hit home on Laura's point. All right, so here's the form, right? So if I was filling out a new implementation project for this client, give a description, and then this is the supplemental docs option that you have here. So you can click upload and upload the project proposal that you've created, flowcharts that they've sent over, really anything that would just be good to get into our hands for review. And then the last thing that you probably didn't see in the screenshot in the PowerPoint was that there's a supplemental interview that you can choose to fill out. Just gives us more information. And none of this is required. So Laura, this is probably something that you just want to outline for people on whether it should or shouldn't be filled out. But there's an option to give us even more information. Other questions about this? Comments? Okay. If there are no questions, I will assume I'm doing a fantastic job.
You are doing a fantastic job.
Oh, thanks. I wasn't fishing for that at all. All right, so we've talked a little bit about the form. Let's talk about what happens when you actually submit that form. And I've alluded to a few of these things already, but let's talk about them in a little bit more detail. All right, so when you submit that form, the project coordinator is notified via email, and they have a task that is assigned to them in Laserfiche Forms. And that task basically requires them to make sure that a case is created in CRM, and they also need to assign it to a member of the consulting team. So if it's a smaller project, it's probably just going to get assigned to a systems architect, whereas if it's a large project or a new implementation, then it would get assigned to a project manager. So that'd be someone like myself, Dan, or Jessica. There are some deadlines built into this process that requires that the project coordinator attend to this within a day of being notified. So, one of the issues that some people had in the past, or just one of the things they account reps wanted to make sure of, is that the ball doesn't get dropped, and understandably so. So that's why we kind of built in some deadline activities that are going to copy you if deadlines are missed, so that you know that, hey, I submitted this a day ago, and it looks like this hasn't even been assigned to a consultant yet. So what's up with that? Let me check into that and find out what's going on and remedy it. So once the project coordinator both creates a CRM case and assigns it to a consultant, then Laserfiche Workflow is going to pick up and do a little bit for us, a little bit of work for us. So Workflow is going to create a client folder structure for any new client. You've probably noticed, hopefully, in Laserfiche that the client file section of our repository is pretty stringent in the way that it's made and created. So pretty much every client should have the same subfolder structure, and that ties into how we file documents so that we can find things easily. Basically, what we promote to our clients are the same practices we try to follow internally. So Workflow creates that folder structure. Workflow then creates a project folder. If you're in Laserfiche and you were looking at a client's folder, you would see a projects area within their folder structure, and we create new project folders for every project we do for a client. So that would include everything from a new implementation, small, large project, audit request, workflow audit request. It's going to create a little area where we can file all of our documentation for that project. And then finally, Workflow makes some decisions on the initial documentation that should be created for that particular project, and it sends out notifications again, okay? So if you submitted a form for a new implementation project and that was assigned to me, I'd get a notification from Workflow saying, Justin, you've been assigned this new project. It would give me a link to that documentation, and it would also copy you on that communication, letting you know that this is the person that project was assigned to. And if you wanted to follow up because you just want to have kind of a sit down, talk more about the project, it's certainly something that you could set up once you know who it's been assigned to. Sometimes when you go in to submit that project form, you may actually have a consultant in mind too. If it's something very specific, we don't have any hard rules or anything on that, but you might say, I was hoping that this could be assigned to so-and-so because I know that they just had a very similar project. So, if their schedule allows and workload allows, it'd be great to get this assigned to a specific person. You probably don't really care too much about what's happening in the background with Workflow, but just as kind of a visual to hit home the idea of that button that you click on the new submission form, how that dictates what documentation is created. This is the section in the workflow that actually does that. So again, when we have an implementation project, it's creating a certain group of entries that is our template to use in consulting. Smaller, large project, it's a different set of documentation. Audit request has our standard audit document created and ready to go. and the workflow audit request creates a different document that's produced. And this just gives us a huge leg up on getting prepared for the project, because all the documentation for the type of project that we're about to embark on is all produced for us automatically by workflow, and template information is assigned, and on and on and on. I mentioned that you'll get an email letting you know who the project has been assigned to, and this is just a screenshot from workflow. That's why you see a lot of goofy tokens in there. But if you see an email that says new project assignment for a client that you recently submitted, this is in fact that email that you're receiving letting you know who it was assigned to, and that it in fact was assigned. All right, so next step. So you've submitted the form, the project coordinator has assigned it to somebody, workflow has produced all this great documentation that gives us a leg up on getting started for the project. Now what happens? So after the project coordinator submits the case and assignment, they actually start working to schedule a project kickoff meeting for the project. Okay, so they'll reach out to the main contact and try to get something set up. The other thing that happens is the assigned project manager or system architect starts reviewing what you submitted. So that includes everything from the form itself, those supplemental questions that we saw, and any documents that you uploaded, like the proposal and any other supplemental documents that you may have submitted. And we're just trying to get ready for that kickoff meeting so that it's as valuable as it can be. It's hard to get meetings with clients and get all the right relevant parties included, so we just want to make sure that when we have that kickoff meeting, we are as well prepared as we possibly can be. I'll make a side note on that. Something that you can do to make sure that we're as prepared as we can be is just make sure that in that project description area of the project form, and really during the entire sales process, just do your best job to outline and understand what the actual scope is that they have in mind for the project. There have been a couple times where I've had projects assigned to me where I don't really get any information going in, and when I start asking the client questions about the project, they're kind of upset because they're like, hey, I thought I already discussed all of this with our account rep. Why am I being made to explain this to you again? And so the more that you can tell us about the project, the more relevant our conversation can be with the client. All right, so the next thing I want to do is just take a look at some of the documentation that we do produce so that you have an idea of what we're using. I think it's good to know this, but also I think that it probably can tie into the sales process. A lot of clients will want to know whether we actually have project management methodologies that we follow here, which we absolutely do, and especially with RFPs that you might be working on someday. They're going to want to get samples of all these different types of documents, and they might actually want more than what we do. I've been here long enough to see probably 10 different iterations of how we handle our projects. We started with not having a lot, the pendulum swings in the opposite direction, and we have just tons of documentation. Then it kind of swings back a little bit, and we're like, all right, well, not all of this is relevant, so how do we boil this down? Because we're not trying to kill people with documentation. We want it to be relevant. And I think right now we're in a pretty good spot where we're trying to do bare minimum is not the way I would put it, but just an appropriate amount of documentation that we can scale with the client to start off with. So let's take a look at just some of those documents that we have. And we'll start with a brand new project, implementation project. This is our project management plan document that's produced. So this is one of the things that Workflow creates. Has anybody seen this from the group? Yeah, again, maybe Chris and Jennifer are the only two that would have seen this at this point.
I don't think I've even seen it.
Okay. All right, so very relevant. So let's just take a quick look at this, and the template for this is 14 pages long, so by the time we get done with it, this document can be pretty substantial, but really we're trying to gather some basic stuff here. We're trying to tell our client who they're going to be working with, get them contact information. Since so much of our work is remote, we we decided to include a picture so that they know that we're actual human beings on the other side of the project. We're trying to gather their information so that we know who's our main contact, who's the project champion, who's our technical contact, who should we contact for billing questions. Is this a multi-departmental implementation? Okay, great. Who's the HR contact? Who's the engineering contact? On and on and on. We want to get as much of that information as we can up front. We have some initial interview questions that kind of help facilitate the discussion, and then we get into what we call our project scope statement. So trying to list out what our project goals are, what the constraints of the project are, which right off the bat we know a couple constraints. We know what software they have, and we know how many hours they've purchased. So one of the first things that we oftentimes are trying to do is make sure that we're reconciling the amount of hours that they have with the goals of their project and the work that needs to be done. And the next document I'll show you kind of ties a little bit into that estimation. Yep, I know Chris and Dan, you got to go, so that's fine. And so we're just trying to outline what those constraints are right at the onset. We get into project deliverables, so we outline, we're going to install the solution, we're going to give you the following training sessions, here are the business process items that we plan to tackle, so this would be like the different workflows they want built, the different departments they want to implement, integrations that they want built, integration points that they want configured, things like that. We do have change request procedures. This gives our client, this kind of a placeholder, but this kind of shows them the overall project steps. So we start with install, we move to overview training, we get into design, development, testing, and then deployment, and finally acceptance. This is a screenshot of a Microsoft project document, which is the other thing I want to show you. Basically, this is a breakdown of all the work that we need to do. So as you come to us and tell us that, hey, they want to implement HR, well, it's kind of our job to figure out what they want to accomplish with HR, because that could be really a myriad of things that they want set up. And we need to define what those are, detailed requirements, and then we need to estimate how much time we think all of those things will take. And we use this to both break down those estimations, and we can also use this to schedule, because we can build in dependencies. I guess Jason, Jennifer, and Michael, you're the three sales people left on the call besides Laura. Have you seen Microsoft Project before, used it in the past, or any other company you've been with used it?
I have not.
I have not either.
Yeah, I have not either.
Okay. Most people see these documents and it just gives them a headache, to be honest. I mean, most clients I work with don't really want to have much to do with this, but they kind of want to know that it exists, so that they understand that we are taking the proper procedures to really estimate both budget and schedule for their project. So there's not any requirement that you become intimately familiar with Microsoft Project, but just know that we use that product to help with our project management methodology. And that may be a selling point for people, just telling them that, yeah, we use pretty basic stuff here that anybody that's trying to manage projects should be using. We also have things like a communications plan, just understanding if we're going to have weekly check-ins, when they can expect reports on, work completed, time used, things like that. This is another thing that I think most clients don't want to have anything to do with, but it's a good thing just to show them that we have, so that they understand that we understand project management. This is just a risk register, so this would be like something to refer back to if things are not going well, to try to identify, what exactly seems to not be working here. What impact to the project does this have? What are symptoms and warning signs? And most importantly, what can we do to mitigate this risk in the future? And really, this is something I've only ever used with a few clients, but when I have, it's been of value. Outline our standard operating procedures here. Make sure that they understand that backup is their responsibility unless they have purchased CDOB. And then finally, we actually ask them to sign off on this project. So that's a project management plan. The other document I wanted to show you was just again, Microsoft project. And I don't want to spend too much time on this because I don't think it's anything that you'll probably deal with all that often, but just so you know, this allows us to build things like a Gantt chart that shows who's responsible for what the dependencies are between different tasks that need to be completed, because if there's one task that's not getting done for whatever reason, and there are 5 things that we can't do until that gets done, it's critical to know where those points are in the work so that we have a very clear picture of that. So this is the other big document that we work on at the onset of a Laserfiche implementation. Any questions about any of those documents? Okay. And then the other item that I wanted to discuss today was just the more individual project documentation. So basically, if you submit a project that you classify as a large project or a small project, what is created then? And basically, it's whatever you submit to us. So it's the form itself and any supplemental documentation. And then we have a standard statement of work that's created that we work to fill out. And I've got a copy of that here. So this is our statement of work. Depending on the project, we might actually make project management plans and use Microsoft Project for things that are not implementations. It kind of depends on whether it's needed or not. If it's a really large project, then those sorts of things can become handy. If it's a small project and we just basically need to bang out exactly what we're going to provide to the client and it's pretty straightforward, then we just use a statement of work. And for that, we go through kind of detail what the background of the project is, what their perceived goals and benefits are, outline the project scope, exclusions, and acceptance criteria, give them an estimate of costs, and essentially we send this to them to review and sign. To give you an idea of what one of these could look like, let me show you one that I just submitted this morning for internal review before I send out. This is for a client in Wisconsin here, Kenosha County. This is a larger statement of work, and it looks like Jessica is probably reviewing this right now. That's why it's locked, but I'll just give you a quick overview of what these can look like when they're done. So this is one I just completed. Overview of the project, goals and benefits, scope. So we're really outlining, this is actually a conversion project, outlining everything we're going to do, all the mapping we're going to perform for them. We're importing hundreds of thousands of files and routing them in Laserfiche. We've got all sorts of supplemental documentation. And then eventually, this is kind of a big one, but we give them a proposed schedule when we're doing things, and then a total cost estimate. So this one we think is going to take a little over 50 hours of time. But that's what these will look like when they're done. And eventually, once Jessica reviews this and approves it, then I'll send it to the client via DocuSign. They sign off, then I can schedule work. In this case, I'll be assigning this work to Eric Anderson. But as a project manager, then it's kind of up to me to assign the work to different architects that we have. So, kind of looking back to what happens when the project is submitted or the contract is signed, that's most immediately what happens. From there, the project starts, and there's a lot of variations in what could happen there, depending on scope, depending on how engaged the client is. Believe it or not, as probably as hard of a time as you can sometimes have with getting them to sign the contract, we have equally as hard a time getting the client to even engage with us sometimes. Periodically, the people that are signing that contract are not the people that are working with us to implement. So sometimes we work with people that have nothing to do with the decision to implement Laserfiche, and they don't have the same buy-in sometimes. So there's a lot of variation that happens after that. I want to try to keep this meeting somewhat succinct and to the point. So with that, without going into further detail on what happens during the project, what questions do you have for me about the process or anything that I've outlined or anything I didn't talk about?
Justin, this is Michael. I got a question for you about the CD. You mentioned CDOM.
CDOB.
At one point. CDOB. What is that?
Okay. City's Digital Online Backup. So we have a service where we will actually back up our clients' data for them.
Which is separate from us creating a cloud platform for them, correct?
Yeah. When we host them, then it's kind of implied that we're backing up their files, but this would be like for a non-hosted client where they have Laserfish on-premise, but they want us to back up that data for them.
How often would you say the client would say we'll handle our own backup versus have us do it?
I would say, Laura might have actual sales metrics on this, but I would say that probably 90% of our clients back up their own stuff.
Okay.
That's exactly what I would have said.
Okay. Yeah, that's just my guess. That's mostly based on I just don't run into very many clients where we're backing up their data for them.
Okay.
Yeah. Other questions? Anything else that you wonder about just the consulting department, how things work?
No, this answered a lot of the questions that I had, and the timing for this was perfect. So this was great.
Okay. Laura, anything else that you'd like me to cover that I didn't touch on?
Nope. I think you did a really great job, Justin.
Thanks so much. Okay, well, I will, I did record this, so I'll send this out as a reminder. I'll send out the PowerPoint too, just as a reference point for you. So I'll get that stuff packaged together and send it out today yet, okay?
Thank you.
Justin, the PowerPoint that you send, is that, do we have a template for that? Or, if I wanted to create, not this presentation, but use it as a template?
Yeah, this is actually brand new. In fact,
It's kind of cool. I like the...
Yeah, I think Aaron has been working on this, so I actually asked him just last week. I was like, what's the latest and greatest PowerPoint that we have? Because I knew I wanted to make something for this presentation, and he sent this to me. So, yeah, I would, Laura, maybe clear with Aaron that this is in fact the final PowerPoint that people okay, it is. Okay. Then I think people just need to get a link to it because this is stored in Laserfish in the marketing department, and at least I know that I don't have access to that, so I don't know who else does. So, okay. Michael, I think to answer your question, yeah, someone probably just needs to give this to you.
Okay. Cool.
All
Real
right.
Nice job. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. If anything else comes up, other questions, feel free to reach out to me, okay?
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye, you too.